Welcome to the Poetry Project. I'm William Page, and today I'm going to talk about Darkness, a poem by Lord Byron. I'm not going to read the whole poem. If you want to hear the poem in its entirety, there's a link in the comments to a reading by the actress Eileen Atkins. I listened to what readings I could find on YouTube, and this is the one that I like the best. Darkness was not the first poem that I read by Byron, but it was the first poem that made an impression. As a young man, I lived in London for about 8 years. This was in the 1980s and 90s. I first came across the poem in a pamphlet. I believe it was at the Poetry Society bookstore. Besides the poem, the pamphlet included a Russian translation by Turgenev, as well as an article about the poem's significance as a description of nuclear winter. That is, the fallout or darkness from a nuclear war that would spew so much debris into the atmosphere that the sun would be blocked from shining on parts of the earth. Byron's description was not all a vision, or as he says, all a dream. It was rooted in his experience of what was referred to at the time as the lost summer of 1816. Though Byron and other Europeans didn't know it, that lost summer, in which there was hail and snow and icy winds as well as darkness, was the result of a volcanic eruption in Indonesia. The eruption of Tambora is thought to have been one of the most powerful in recorded history. The darkened atmosphere that summer was the cause of widespread crop failures and famine in Europe and in Canada. It is even said that the murky colorings of J.M.W. Turner's paintings during this year is a record of the effect of this eruption. That summer, Byron was living at the Villa Diodati in Switzerland with his guest Percy Bysshe Shelley and wife Mary Shelley. It was because of the inclement weather from the effects of the volcano that they often found themselves confined to the villa. It was during this confinement that Byron suggested a contest to see who could write the best ghost story. While the other two abandoned their tales, Mary Shelley's story, Frankenstein, as we all know, became a landmark of Gothic horror and early science fiction. It's easy to imagine that if this volcanic eruption had never happened, Frankenstein might never have been written. The dark atmosphere is essential to the inspiration and mood for both the novel and for Byron's poem. What struck me on first reading Darkness was not the mood, but the versification. Here's the first part. I had a dream, which was not all a dream. The bright sun was extinguished, and the stars did wander darkling in the eternal space, rayless and pathless. And the icy earth swung blind and blackening in the moonless air. Morn came and brought no day, and men forgot their passions in the dread of this their desolation. And all hearts were chilled into a selfish prayer for light. And they did live by watchfires. And the thrones, the palaces of crowned kings, the huts, the habitations of all things which dwell, were burnt for beacons. Cities were consumed, and men were gathered round their blazing homes to look once more into each other's face. I read this passage standing in the bookstore. My first thought was, who can write like this? Though I had clear evidence that it was Byron, the poet that I thought of was Shakespeare. My mind at the time was saturated with Shakespeare because I'd spent the last 3 years reading and rereading his plays. In particular, my mind went to the chorus speeches in Henry V. Here's the beginning of the chorus speech at the start of Act 4. Now, entertain conjecture of a time when creeping murmur and the pouring dark fills the wide vessel of the universe. From camp to camp through the foul womb of night the hum of either army stilly sounds, that the fixed sentinels almost receive the secret whispers of each other's watch. Fire answers fire, and through their palely flames each battle sees the other's umbered face. Of course, the main similarity between these two passages is that they were both written in blank verse. As I said, I was not very familiar with Byron at the time. I had read some Goethe, and I knew from the conversations with Eckermann that he thought Byron was an immense talent, calling him the greatest talent of the century and a grand genius. I had tried to read Don Juan, but I found the form of the poem too laborious and artificial. There are brilliant passages, but the form, it is written in an Italian 8-line stanza called octavo rima, which has a rhyme scheme of A-B, 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 C-C. And for me, that just didn't work for such a long poem. In the end, I didn't finish it. But I was so impressed with Darkness that I began to reread Byron. I started with his shorter poems and his letters and journals. The letters and journals had recently been published in a modern 12-volume set in England by the John Murray Press, the same firm that had originally published Byron in the 19th century. I picked up single volumes of this set whenever I found one in a used bookshop around London. Besides being enormously entertaining, I found that the journals and letters revealed a great deal of what Byron thought of poetry and other poets. He held odd, often contradictory opinions of Shakespeare, saying that he was rated as high as he was only because of his low origin. He also considered Milton, not Shakespeare, to be the master of blank verse, which was not an unusual opinion for the time. Shakespeare in the Romantic era was regarded by some critics as a kind of savant, an unconscious genius, which may seem ridiculous to us, who have a better grasp of the depth of his understanding of human psychology. In fact, there is a good argument that Shakespeare was not fully appreciated as an artist until the 20th century, but that is a subject for another video. Byron wrote, "Shakespeare's name, you can depend on it, stands absurdly too high and will go down." But at the same time, he often quoted Shakespeare. He also thought that blank verse was lazy and diffusive, and that rhyme verse, even for longer poems, was more energetic. Despite his disdain for blank verse, he used it for his dramas and for two poems, Darkness and The Dream, both of which are brilliant. His respect for Shakespeare does come out in the letters. At one point he admits that he didn't write more in blank verse because he didn't want to be compared to Shakespeare. In many ways, Darkness is a simple poem. Its vision is post-apocalyptic. That is, some unnamed event or disaster has occurred before the time of the poem, and that has sunk the earth into a perpetual night. This is announced in the first lines. The bright sun was extinguished, and the stars did wander darkling in the eternal space, rayless and pathless, and the icy earth swung blind and blackening in the moonless air. The rest of the poem is really just about how men reacted to being deprived of the sun. I guess in a way the poem can be seen as a hellscape where men are deprived of light. I'm not sure we can consider Byron a religious or spiritual poet, so I'm a little hesitant in saying that the light in this poem is a symbol for God or a higher world. But it certainly can be read that way. This is a kind of paradise lost, with the paradise in this case being the earth before the event, which really makes this a very modern poem. The text of the poem is filled with an incredible, even desperate longing for light. Listen to these lines. And all hearts were chilled into a selfish prayer for light. And the brows of men by despairing light wore an unearthly aspect. As by fits the flashes fell upon them, some lay down and hid their eyes and wept. And without the daylight the earth is nothing but a lump of death, a chaos of hard clay. Byron's men are not passive. They long for light with such desperation that they burn everything they have built. With a kind of dejected agony they raise all the trappings of the civilized world. There is no thought of adapting to the darkness. They are like addicts in a mad race to burn down their world for what little temporary light the flames generate. And they did live by watchfires, and the thrones, the palaces of crowned kings, the huts, the habitations of all things which dwell, were burnt for beacons. Cities were consumed, and men were gathered round their blazing homes. Forests were set on fire, but hour by hour they fell and faded, and the crackling trunks extinguished with a crash, and all was black. Their fear of darkness is so intense that they become mad, and others hurried to and fro, and fed their funeral piles with fuel, and looked up with mad disquiet on the dull sky. There is no courage or love in Byron's snapshot of humanity. The only creature who retains some semblance of devotion is a single dog. Even the dogs assailed their masters, all save one, and he was faithful to a course, and kept the birds and beasts and famished men at bay till hunger claimed them, or the drooping dead lured their lank jaws. Himself sought out no food, but with a piteous and perpetual moan, and a quick, desolate cry, licking the hand which answered not with a caress, he died. There is no religion in this place, or at least religion is no consolation. Enemies met beside the dying embers of an altar place, where had been heaped a mass of holy things for an unholy usage. They raked up, and shivering scraped with their cold skeleton hands the feeble ashes, and their feeble breath blew for a little life and made a flame, which was a mockery. There is no hope also in this picture. Listen to these lines. A meal was bought with blood. The meager by the meager were devoured. All earth was but one thought, and that was death, immediate and inglorious. He ends with this. The winds were withered in the stagnant air, and the clouds perished. Darkness had no need of aid from them. She was the universe. It's important for us to remember the reality that set this poem in motion. That is, a single volcanic eruption more than 7,000 miles away from Byron's villa. Think about that. 7,000 miles. In an increasingly small planet, we forget that when one nation bombs another, or a corporation ravages lands and rivers to steal raw materials, there is a fallout for all of us. We live in a dark and dangerous time. Right now, a handful of men who are clearly insane hold the potential to unleash an event that could prove Byron's vision to be prophetic. What seems to be true of all these tyrants is that they are short-sighted. They are small men who have no vision, and therefore cannot conceive the fallout of their greed and unconsidered actions. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. It helps a little in getting these videos out. It does seem that the YouTube algorithms, which suggest videos to others, favor AI videos over the work of artist and intelligent human commentary, which in itself is a disturbing trend. I have a poem about AI in the work, but I'm waiting to release it because I'm hoping to get a friend to write some music for it. It's called Frankenstein. Thanks again. Comment if you like.